And we're live. Hello and welcome to Media Studies. I'm James Brown. Thanks for joining me. You can check out my work at jamesbrowntv.substack.com or anywhere on social media at James Brown TV. Hey, I'd love to hear what you got to say. Oh, got a bit of an echo there. Echo is gone. This week, we're going to talk about the Peacock gang. I was wrong. I will admit it fully in full-throatedly. We're going to talk about Sports Illustrated firing just about everyone. It may be just to unionize people, maybe not. Conflicting reports so far. This is a breaking situation. And we're going to talk about GQ and Pitchfork with a writer, a frequent collaborator of mine, Saby Reyes Kulkarni. He's got plenty of experience working for Pitchfork. He went on a bit of a rant on Twitter about this, so we'll have him on a bit later. He could join us at any moment. But first, I'm going to start with my thoughts about Peacock and why I was wrong. I hate admitting when I'm wrong, but hey, it's the truth. I was wrong about this one. Share a bit of my screen here. Peacock apparently hosted the biggest live stream event in the history of America. I'll make that a bit bigger for those of you watching this presentation. It's still unfathomable to me. I'm not sure I totally believe what I'm said, but we'll go through it line by line. I'll tell you my thoughts on it. We're about a week out from this press release. The game reached nearly 28 million viewers, with an average audience peaking at nearly 25 million viewers between 9:15 and 9:30 p.m. That makes sense because the game was pretty much a snooze fest after all that. The Dolphins Chief averaged about 23 million viewers, the most streamed event in the history of the U.S., topping last year's Saturday night AFC wildcard game by 6%, which was not streamed. Peacock registered the biggest day in its history, driven by the NFL wildcard exclusive entertainment programming. Browns-Texans game is the most watched Saturday NFL wildcard game on NBC since 2014. That last bit is an important bit because we can compare the two. That the Browns-Texans game was on over-the-air TV. The Peacock game was, of course, exclusive to Peacock. I said on this very program a week ago from now, that I believed that Peacock would attract under 10 million viewers. That's with the full knowledge that Peacock only has about 30 million viewers total. And how many of them would be football fans? I wasn't expecting a lot. Apparently, there was a crush of fans to Peacock. A lot of signups, and I bet a lot of churn and dumps. So how do I feel about this? I honestly think that in the short run, it's good. They had an influx of revenue. I'm not sure they made $100 million, which they spent on the product, but they did definitely get a lot more eyes on the product. And they did something that I think a lot of people take for granted, is the fact that we have to teach the audience, and a large amount of the audience, especially older audience members, how to use streaming programming, how to download Peacock and watch a game. And then once they understand how they do that, then it becomes easier for them to do that. It's not as obvious a thing as it would for us natives, the people who would watch a YouTube stream of a guy yammering around about media, or downloading a podcast. A lot of people, there's still a hurdle for a lot of people when it comes to streaming. So that's one of the big positives. One of the big negatives is for the NFL. So, yes, you got a sizable audience. Yes, this Peacock game on a normal week would be by far the largest TV show, the largest show on television. It's not really a question. It would be far and away. There are weeks where we don't get over 10 million viewers for one show on television. So the idea of getting that many of viewers on a potential media partner's site is highly, highly important for the league. But given the fact that the Dallas Cowboys, yes, high profile teams, Cowboys, Packers, two national products, the next day could attract 40 million viewers on Fox. Has to put a bit more perspective on what you're doing here. That 15 million or so viewers, a lot of them may never totally convert to digital. I think some will. I mean, I think we all will to a certain degree, but the ease for most people to go and turn to a Fox affiliate versus turning to a streaming service, often within another streaming service, or on a Fire Stick or an Xbox, as I've done at times, it's more difficult than it appears. I think we're a long ways off from getting to a Peacock exclusive moment, a moment where these leagues are going to feel like they could get parity in terms of audience by going to, say, Amazon Prime for more than one game a week, by going to Apple TV Plus, by going to anywhere really but Netflix. I mean, Hulu hasn't had an exclusive live stream yet. Maybe it could get somewhere a bit more than a Peacock could get. I mean, it is in more places. It has more subscribers, but it's hard for me to believe that the NFL is ready to put all their chips in this basket. They will take, without a doubt, they'll take every piece of money that these networks will throw at them. I mean, that's the whole point. It is testing the idea that these games could be viable on streaming first, so they could extort more money out of these networks, because that's what it's all about for them. So this is certainly a step forward, but I don't know if the folks down on Park Avenue at the NFL are going to do cartwheels about this one. I think they're very happy that at least we're taking steps forward. Now, I want to also address some of the claims in this. The most streamed event in US history. Now, if you're watching me or listening without Googling it, I want you to stop and think. What was the most streamed event in US history prior to this? I'll wait. No clue, huh? Me either. I don't know what it is. So yeah, that is one of those strange claims that it sounds impressive until you actually like think about it. What was it really? Do we if we have no idea what it was, it's like saying you're the king of carrot flowers or king of the of a mound of dirt. You don't know how actually impressive it was. We could compare it to the other Peacock exclusive game, my Buffalo Bills and the San Diego Chargers, or not San Diego Chargers, they're the LA Chargers now. Yeah, I'm showing my age. They battled a few weeks back and only got about 9 million streamed viewers. So you would think that it would be more than 9, but not quite 23. It it's one of those claims that puts us in a bad spot because how can you even come up with a clear view of what you're talking about? In my perspective, how are Nielsen what's Nielsen considering a view or a viewer in this case? Is it held to the same standard of TV viewerships? That's unclear. What we know is that Nielsen and Amazon have been up to some shenanigans during the regular season where their numbers apparently have been inflated a bit. At least that's the claim. So how do we know that the information here is clear and correct? We just know NBC's claim. We don't know where the rest of this comes from. We honestly don't know. So when I think about this and the fact that NBC was so in a rush to send this out, they literally produced a hype video with it on during the Sunday night football game last week. It makes me wonder, how can I trust this information? Are they being graded on the same level, the same curve as all their competitors? I don't know. I honestly don't know. And that's troubling to me. I don't know that I can believe what NBC is selling about Peacock in this game. I know what they want us to believe. I know what they're going to sell their advertisers. I know what the league wants us to believe. But I don't quite trust these numbers. And ladies and gentlemen, we have a guest in the building, Saby Reyes Kulkarni Jr.
What's up? What's up? What's up?
has joined me as well. You're loud and clear.
Thank you.
Hey, Saby, I was just ranting about the Peacock game. Did you watch any of it?
I did. I watched the whole thing.
Do you believe that it's the most streamed event in U.S. history?
I mean, I have no way of knowing for sure. I guess if we ask Ethan Strauss, he and Ryan, not Glockenspiel. What? Why am I having a hard time?
Glass Spiegel.
Glass Spiegel. Yeah. Sorry, Ryan. They would say they always qualify that with the way the numbers are counted, which suggests to me that there's some, I don't know, trickery going on.
I would, and obviously I'm not in total agreement with those guys all the time, but I think on this one, they're definitely onto something. I think that when it comes to this kind of event where, as I was just saying a minute or so ago, it's hard to tell whether everybody's being graded on a curve. Nielsen is an imperfect operator. They've always been an imperfect operator. Let's say you and I watched the game together. How is Nielsen to know we don't live in the same house? How is Nielsen to know that we're together? You just no way to do that. Like and one way they do they do it is it's a term called out of home viewing, or OOH.
Mhm.
Which has been a boon for sports ratings over the last few years. It's a new concept that was introduced, I believe, in 2019, maybe 2020, not quite sure. So we're not talking about something that is we're not talking about something that is clear as day, if you know what I mean. We're
Mhm.
talking about something that's new, something that it's has a lot of proprietary information involved too. No doubt Peacock knows exactly how many people streamed, no doubt. But if that number was actually lower than the estimate that Nielsen did, I don't. They would keep their total mouth shut.
Right, because all of these networks and streaming platforms are trying to maximize the advertising buck they can the bang for the buck they can get, right? Like, so if they, I don't want to say inflate, but if they present the numbers in the most flattering light, then they can claim success and then build on that. I mean, they don't know how many people watch. They know how many
Accounts were logged in.
devices, right, were streamed on and accounts were
Now,
logged in, exactly. But I mean, that could be somebody at having a party with
sure,
like 10 people.
they
That
would
that
have they'd have a closer estimate than Nielsen would.
right, right.
And they have no reason to contradict Nielsen unless Nielsen was under, which they have done before. They've done it with the Olympics,
Mm.
where they felt that Nielsen's numbers were low. They've come out with press releases saying, "Hey, Nielsen's numbers were low."
That's pretty funny. That's
All
pretty
right,
funny. It's like, oh, don't look at that over there. That's not.
yeah.
That's really funny. That's like if like somebody in your family lets somebody who rang the bell into the house and you didn't want them to see your sloppy ass room. Oh, don't let them in there. You know, kind of a thing. That's pretty funny.
So I, I I'm skeptical about the reality of these numbers. I I do think the NFL is probably happy. Not fully happy. I know if you look at as I mentioned also earlier,
Hmm.
the Cowboys game got 40 million.
Mm.
Wild card games don't get 40 million.
That is. So you're saying those numbers are cooked up.
Hard to say for sure.
I mean, the Cowboys do traditionally do a lot better than everybody
Yeah, but
else.
the
Lord
Cowboys
knows
were in the
why.
wild card weekend last year, but they, I mean, they didn't get 40 million.
What? How much more was it than the rest of the games that weekend?
The
Do you have those numbers?
the Cowboy game
Mhm.
or the Peacock game?
The Cowboy game
Cowboy game was the
last
high
year
for sure. Last year, I
compared to
believe
the other wild card weekend games.
I don't have that breakdown on my at my
I'd
fingertips,
be
but
curious.
but I remember it being in the low 30s.
Right. So 40, that's a huge jump.
And I'm not claiming that number is cooked. I actually believe is not quite the right word. See, here's the thing with at least those numbers, when it's not exclusively on a platform like Peacock or Netflix or Amazon, um,
You're
at
not
least,
relying on one source to report.
absolutely, that's the problem.
But the other thing that's strange about that is that game was a blowout from the beginning. So
Mhm.
would more people have tuned in out of Cowboy hatred as it went along?
Or shock.
Mm,
I
mm.
was
Oh, yeah, like, oh, you get a text like, "Yo, check out the game, what's happening, you won't believe this," kind of a thing.
yeah, totally. That kind of happened with me the day before. I was in my basement. I was putting together these shelves. So I wasn't watching the Texans game,
Mhm, mhm.
and my girlfriend said, like, we call the CJ Stroud braided wonder. Right? He's like, he's kicking their ass.
Mhm.
I had no idea that they were beating the crap. That wasn't the Steelers. That was
Browns, Browns.
the Browns. They're beating the crap out of the Browns. I had no idea, and I watched the rest of the game
Mm.
because I was like, this is shocking.
Mhm,
So,
mhm,
so I can certainly see a tune-in factor with the Cowboys, especially because of the hatred, as you mentioned, and because of their profile.
mhm.
They are one of a handful of national NFL teams, truly
I'm
national NFL teams.
I'm curious to get your take on why that has sustained over what's really a 30 plus year period of
Longer than that. Longer,
irrelevance.
longer than that.
I
Much longer than
mean,
that.
like, no, irrelevance is what I'm saying. In terms of
Yeah.
the actual product on the field, I
Oh,
don't understand
irrelevant.
how he's managed to keep that brand such a high profile when really the game. I mean, they are the definition of all sizzle, no steak, and I just don't get it. I don't understand why. I mean, I think it's because it was so successfully branded in the past
Hmm.
that maybe you have generations of people all
Without a
over the
doubt.
country who like to root for them. And also, now that I think about it from a marketing perspective, the Thanksgiving game probably helps a lot
That's
every
huge.
year.
Yeah.
Like just draw people in because they're fucking watching it, you know, at
Yeah.
Thanksgiving.
That's certainly huge. I think the Thanksgiving game is a big part. I think certainly the stars that they've had go through there have been immense, and I think that's a big part as well. I think you mentioned generations of fans.
Mhm.
Absolutely. For a very long time, they were really the only team in the South, or one of a very
That's
few.
right. That's right. That's right. I forgot about that. Yes, that is. I've been told that before. That
And
anywhere down there, you would have just by default rooted for the Cowboys.
yeah, and I think their fan base is extra large for that fact. Not alone, but that's a big one. I think also their branding's really great. Look, their jerseys are
Their
fantastic. Their
logo
logo's amazing. The fact that their stadium, both of their last two stadiums, this stadium and the last one, both incredibly unique. You had
and
go ahead.
sorry, and the owner's a character which you don't see anywhere else. He's
Precisely.
the NFL's George Steinbrenner, which who was it who just made that comparison? I just watched somebody, and apologies to whoever that is because Michael Hawley
Okay.
compared him to Steinbrenner, which the NFL doesn't have that. Al Davis was that
Sure.
before,
Yeah.
but it
And,
doesn't have character in its ownership. So,
yeah.
but I
And
mean, as
maybe,
far as the product,
yeah.
oh
Well,
my god,
well, well. I mean, look, they haven't been. They weren't the Bills, or even like the Browns, this new version of the Browns, where they were never good. During this 30-year stretch, they have been never good enough, which does add to the drama of it.
yes,
You're kind of waiting for them to self-destruct.
yes. I think for people who don't like them,
Yeah,
it increases their profile. You know, Michael Smith, Michael Hawley's broadcast partner,
sure.
said, "I would rather have a team be a laughing stock than this." He was like going on. He's like, this is like a sick joke." He was really
Uh,
animated about it. He's like, "This, I don't understand what would motivate people to subject themselves to this kind of suffering." He said, "You have to be masochistic."
as a masochistic Bills fan, The man doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about.
Well, he admitted he gave up on the Saints after 2 playoff losses. He grew up as a Saints fan, and he gave up on them after 2. He got his heart broken twice. He said that's enough, and then he got into broadcasting, and that you weren't supposed to be a fan back in the day when he came in. So
How about losing 4 Super Bowls in a
I
row?
understand.
Having the biggest scar in the history of your team, being accused of double murder, probably did do it. And then having the highest winning percentage of a decade, never winning the Super Bowl, and then having the biggest heartbreak moment in playoff history up to that point, probably up to the Falcons when they're gag up in the Super Bowl, and then not the drought, not making the playoffs for 17 years. But I mean, look, I think there's an argument there that the Cowboys have been highly disappointing. But myself, the Lions fans, the Browns fans,
Sure,
I know a lot of football fans, the freaking San Diego / LA Chargers. I mean, like there's a lot of fan bases that I think I would gladly trade places with the Cowboys.
Jacksonville's
another one, certainly.
Yeah.
I don't know that as a Bills fan I'd want to trade places with them.
No. Jacksonville would trade places with the Cowboys. Is a fan base that would.
Jacksonville would.
Yeah,
Jacksonville would. Yeah.
Right, to your point. But here's the thing.
They're at the point where they've lost 2 games a year. They play 2 games a year in London.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I mean, it's if you are a diehard Jag fan, you got to be like, what the hell? You're going to play 2 games a year in London, 2 home games in London, and then extort my city for a new stadium?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and then like, hey, ain't I great? You got 6 games?
I guess what I was.
Sorry.
What I feel. No. It's okay. Is since the 2 dynasties, so like the 70s Cowboys and then the 90s Cowboys, just the mediocrity and the underachieving is just kind of gross, though. And I can see where Smith is coming from. It's like there's something about always sort of being on the verge, and then he said, this team will find new and creative ways to let you down, and they did. Right. They just did it the other day. I wasn't surprised. I've been saying for years. I posted about the Cowboys right after they lost. They're not going to win shit as long as Jerry Jones is alive, and you can book that.
Well, as long as Jerry Jones is running the team the way he's choosing to now,
which he's clearly not going to yield from doing that because he had a golden opportunity, or one would presume, to make a change, and he's going with the status quo. There's no way in hell you keep that coach. I mean, this guy cannot stay away from the microphone. And then I've heard multiple sportscasters speculate whether he's been lying all along about wanting to win so bad that this has all actually been a big marketing ruse, that he's just playing that role just because he knows he's laughing all the way to the bank. I don't know.
No, I think that
looks sincere to me.
Yeah, I think he does actually want to win. I do think when you look at the history of sports, patient guys win more than impatient guys.
Interesting. That's a really, I'm really curious.
If you are constantly firing your coach, if there's constant turnover in the philosophy of your team, the philosophy of your management, you're going to be bad, or at least unstable at minimum. And I give you stability. The Ravens are the perfect example. Ironically, we're talking about a team that ripped their team away from Cleveland and moved to Baltimore. And they've been under basically the same management team since 99?
I was going to say early 2000s, but yeah, okay.
98? We're talking a few years before. They won that first Super Bowl
Mhm.
with Jamal Lewis and company, Trent Dilfer, Ray Lewis, of course, with
Shannon
Ed
Sharp.
Reed, Shannon Sharp. So you had you have stability of management, you have philosophy, you have an archetypal players.
And
So you
and a culture, yes,
they
archetype
all fit in there.
yeah, and a certain, like you said, a certain archetype of a player,
Mhm.
type of player and model system also for
Yeah.
those players.
A similar one is the Steelers.
Mm,
Um, they've won, I believe, 6 titles, um, and they've had 3 coaches in a half century.
right. I still definitely think they should make a change, but there are very few
And
people in media.
maybe it is time to make a change. I wouldn't say you're wrong on that one. It's a matter of time, you know, when you pull the plug. I don't know that the game is so much past Tomlin by. Maybe they just need a new voice,
Mm,
but even when you look at the 3 coaches they had, their voices are similar.
mhm.
They were all similar choices too. They were all young defensive coordinators.
Yeah, you always think of a certain style, like, you definitely think of a team identity in terms of how they approach the game, period, when you think
Mhm.
of the Steelers, which is a great thing.
And when you think of the Cowboys, Roger Staubach,
Mm,
Troy Aikman,
mhm,
Danny, Dandy Don Meredith, um, Tony Romo, and now Dak. You have this sort of flashy-ish star quarterback.
mhm,
Um, always excellent um, skill position guys. Like even kind of the Trayvon Diggs and Deron Bland kind of fit that too, of that flashy cornerback.
mhm,
Through the annals of Cowboys history, it's a similar kind of guy that they're looking for. Obviously, it has not been as successful recently. For the first half of the first half of Super Bowls, they were incredibly. You mentioned
mhm.
2 dynasties and a ton of playoff success in between. And for the second half, not so much. I think mathematically, thinking about it analytically, you're keeping things as stable as possible is a positive.
Mm.
But I do think it is a negative to have ownership so involved
Oh
with
my god.
choosing. I mean, Jerry's the GM, and I hope that when Steven takes over at some point, and his daughter Charlotte, um, that they've learned the lesson that, hey, we should have not only football guys, but kind of have a bit of distance from the day-to-day decision making.
Yeah, and I
They
mean,
come in and help with the big decisions. That's what they do in Philadelphia.
mm,
That's part of their success over the last few decades as well.
seems to be working.
They've been a bit more unstable in the last few years, but in terms of their team success, they've
Mhm.
been regularly successful, I'd say, since what, 98, 99? When did Andy Reid get there? Around then?
Around then, yeah. You said something about the Cowboys. Michael Hawley said he thinks the players buckle under the weight of the myth. That because they get convinced because it comes from the top, and I've heard lots of
Sure.
commentators say this, like, you've got the owner out there spouting off every week. He's the only owner that does that,
Yeah.
and eclipses the attention that the head coach gets, right? So this is a person who is likely, if not incapable, really not amenable to having a coach who is going to take the attention away from him. We've seen that
Mhm.
we know this is what happened, right? Or at least a surface read of it. He couldn't handle Jimmy Johnson being such a big personality, Bill Parcells, etc. So, like, because they hear from the owner, it's like they're psyching themselves out. You got Micah Parsons on his podcast. These guys get wrapped up in the whole myth of it and then can't deliver in these big moments. I think there's something to that. I mean, I'm not a sports psychologist, but because Michael Smith was saying you cannot account for how badly that team plays. Talent is not the issue.
No, it's not. It's not.
It's like, holy shit. And they got rolled. like that final score, the Packers just stopped caring because the game was in hand. But I mean, it was 48-16 in going into the fourth quarter.
Sure.
God damn. That was and so that's why it's like this brand to me is almost a joke. I posted that they're the Harlem Globetrotters of the NFL, only without the humor, charm, or entertainment value. No, obviously the ratings attest otherwise. That they entertain the shit out of people.
They're entertaining. And watching their house of cards of that team with a glass jaw that they keep building over and over again fall down on the face is a rating success. I mean, it is a similar thing, honestly, sadly, and hopefully it ends now this weekend with my Bills. They become a ratings draw by watching America watching them get close, but so far.
But
that is part of the draw of teams, especially in football.
But I don't think with the Bills it's necessarily motivated by Schadenfreude as it is with the Cowboys, wouldn't you say?
No, it's not the same level. It's not the same level of Schadenfreude. No. But it is that sort of, are they going to get over the top this time? And I think there's some level of that with both teams.
Sure. And I think it gets in their heads too. Yeah.
Sure. I think I don't, obviously there's no way to know for sure the game's tomorrow night, but I think the thing with the Cowboys and the Bills that have been similar in this iteration is learning to win dirty and not win by cheating, but not win pretty.
Yeah, not win in a glamorous way. Yeah.
Yeah. The Bills have been over the last few years a team that when they win, they beat the crap out of you. And then when they lose by a hair. Now they've learned how to win in a number of different ways, and that's something that this iteration of the Cowboys has to learn as well. The trouble is they're at the end of a money cycle. They have a bunch of big contracts that are coming up shortly, and they're going to have to not gut that roster, but probably slim it down and start over at a lot of different spots. Well, I want to keep going to move off of this football spot and slide into Sports Illustrated.
Can I first, though, before we do that?
Sure.
I would be curious to get your take on Jerod Mayo's press conference, because I have thoughts about that, and I don't know where that slots into where you want to go, but I just wanted to put that out.
No, I didn't plan on bringing this up. I plan on doing a shorty on it on my commentary podcast, but I can give you my thoughts. How about you go first?
Well, I didn't watch the whole thing, but it pissed me off.
Which part?
Well, I only saw the one sliver, so I should have watched the whole thing to have broader, more context, the full context. I could be taking it a little bit out of context.
The I don't see color part?
No, that part didn't bother me.
Okay.
It was when he tutted Robert Kraft for not being able to pronounce his siblings' names.
Okay.
And it just goes to show, I'm sure people will say, well, Jesus, you sound like Jason Whitlock. But it just goes to show how far we've gotten.
Let me see if I can find that one real quick.
where you can do you want me to keep talking about it?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, where you can scold a white person, even if it's a white billionaire who's your employer, who's signing your fucking check.
Of course, Outkick is the first.
Yeah, and I saw what's his name, Matt Walsh. I didn't watch Matt Walsh's video on it either. I didn't feel like I don't need it to be redigested for me. But I didn't like the tone of that, as if he's impugning and like, because he joked. And again, we don't know. These guys might joke with each other, banter this way back and forth. I don't know this, right? So I could be taking it out of context, but Kraft mispronounced,
Okay.
had trouble. He stumbled over Mayo's siblings' names, and he's like, black names. You need me to help? I can help you a little bit with that.
All right, I'll play it.
Sherman. Sherman. I'll get it right. Get it right. Well, we'll have to. No, it's all right. It's one of those black names. I'll help you with that.
Jerod Mayo got his tenure as New.
I mean, now that I watch it again, it's. I could totally see somebody doing that just in jest. But and again, somebody could turn around and say, "Oh, Jesus, you really care about a white billionaire's feelings so much, don't you?" But that's not the point here. It's that white people have gotten accustomed to deferring and sort of being the butt of the joke. While billionaires are out there doing real shit that's imperils all of us, a billionaire football owner he knows how to read the room enough. He's astute enough to know, I'll just go along with this because that's sort of the way the wind is blowing socially, where I have to kind of take this. What I would have said to him is, how many African kids' names did your siblings mispronounce when you were growing up? Or what nicknames did you have for Latin kids in your neighborhood that you were fucking up and butchering their names? Don't try to fucking, like, it's like showing them up, kind of. And the fact is, some people have trouble pronouncing those names. It was like hanging Robert out to dry with Robert's participation as a white person who's gotten accustomed to, just slap me on the face, and I'll laugh about it too. I don't like that, and I think that shit needs to stop. I don't know for a fact that that's where he was coming from, because I don't know. These guys behind closed doors, they could be fucking. Mayo could be making Jewish jokes. You know what I'm saying? We don't know. I would love it if that were true, actually. Right? Or that would have been a hilarious comeback, actually. It's like, oh, well, I'll bring you to the synagogue and see how you do at my, grandnephew's bat mitzvah or something, bar mitzvah. But do you know what I'm talking about? Where?
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. I'll address it in a couple different ways. Because I think it is an interesting topic. I didn't take it to heart like you did, but it is interesting. Okay, I'll address what I know about their relationship.
Well, let me just say this. If a comedian had been if your boy the late great Patrice was like, yeah, you got trouble with that black shit, don't you? That would have been funny. You see what I'm saying? If the tone was like, this, and that's maybe what Jerod Mayo, he was like elbowing him like, I know you got trouble with that black shit. But it came off as like white people have like volunteered to be punching bags, as if, throw a tomato at my face, I'm cool with it.
I didn't take it to heart like that. But I'll go in these directions. One, we know that the Crafts and Jerod Mayo and his wife have been buddy since he was a player.
Okay.
Lots of dinners together.
Mm-hmm.
When Jerod Mayo retired and he wanted to go into finance, it was Robert Kraft who got him the job. break into finance for a few years before he came back to the Patriots.
So we're seeing a glimpse into their private banter is what is probably what we're
Possibly.
looking at.
I don't know, but possibly, it is possible that they are. I don't know to what extent. Perhaps it is to the extent that you were describing. Hard to say, but it is possible that they are that. I don't know, obviously. So they are said to be incredibly close, which makes me wonder about the dynamic with Belichick and why he was on the staff. I know he was, obviously a guy that Belichick drafted and ushered through his entire career. He was a leader on the team throughout his entire career. And then but my guess is Belichick had to know that he's buddy with the owner and that I'm in my mid-60s and now 70s.
Hey, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. You know what I'm saying?
No doubt, because I think that's an interesting phrasing for it, because you could argue that that's what happened, how he got the job in New England. He was the coordinator under Bill Parcells. He was close with the Crafts. So when they fired Pete Carroll back in the day, and strangely enough, they fire Pete Carroll. Carroll gets sandbagged the day before he leaves the Patriots. It's poetry.
I know,
but
it's like they're like karmically linked.
Yeah.
And then let's not forget one of the worst Super Bowl losses.
Yeah.
It's the number 2 or the number 1 most rewatched Super Bowl too, I think.
Oh, no doubt. Makes sense. That it was a great game, and that was a heartbreaking moment. Like, it was just
for people who weren't even fans of the Seahawks.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah. It was such an obvious decision to do the opposite. The way that Marshawn Lynch was running that whole game.
Well, this gets nuanced because it wasn't, and I'm so surprised, and I don't mean to keep derailing your points, but I'm so surprised to have heard Shannon Sharp and Ocho Cinco talk about this. Oh, run the ball. They were 1 for 5. Yeah, they were 1 for 5 that year in that exact play. So you have to factor that in. Also, Pete Carroll lost a championship or whatever at USC on the goal line attempting to run the ball. So there's more to it than that. And the thing is though, when oh my God, Herm Edwards diagnosed the next day on a chalkboard, he was like, Russell Wilson could have just fucking strolled into the end zone if he just gone left. It's like, wow, man, like that is. But so yeah, so you were saying about this, but it's like basically the sinking of a potential dynasty of a back-to-back Super Bowl championship.
Very rare.
And this is the guy and he took your job. He replaced you. Wow.
And by the way, that's also bodes well on the hiring. I mean, he's hired 3 coaches: Bill Parcells, Pete Carroll, Bill Belichick. So maybe he has an eye for this kind of thing. Hard to say. It's been a long time, but and also, speaking of the models thing that I was talking about earlier, all defensive coaches, and who knows what happens from here. But that's one side of the coin. One side of the coin that they're very close. Who knows what the nature of their relationship is?
Yeah, it's just in the current social climate that we're in, where people feel empowered, emboldened to throw this weight around. I just find it in poor taste. Okay, that's a billionaire, but the irony of that is you're not actually showing this guy up the way you might think. It's a very cosmetic, surface level, sort of ego boosting flash in the pan, low calorie form of power that is not actually power. It's just a form of leverage that you can now call on anytime you want in an everyday interaction that is actually disempowering in the long run. It's fool's gold. It's snake oil. And I see people have bought into this hook, line, and sinker to the point that you have these well-meaning white progressives who are not even a member of the fucking group that you're talking about, who think they are now entitled and even obligated to shut you down and say, well, you can't. It's like, whoa, this has become woven into everyday interaction discourse, and it's got to stop. And so with that backdrop, I just didn't like the tone of it. And we don't know what Robert Kraft and his billionaire cronies are doing behind the scenes. They can act like they give a fuck about being proper when it comes to talking about race, but like to have somebody be like, it's too black for you, I'll help you with that. I just, it was showing them up. Like, I'd have been pissed if somebody said that to me, although I probably could have pronounced the names, to be honest, but
yeah, that's okay.
so
I don't know. I don't know how and maybe if you were pissed, let's say Robert was pissed. Robert's been in front of enough cameras for long enough where he knows that that's not the time. I don't think he would do that then. Maybe you do it later. Maybe, hey, like, what's up? maybe, or maybe it doesn't matter to him. Maybe it just rolled off his back.
Maybe. But, I could hear your Rick Stroms or your Dave Zyrins and certainly Jamel Hill. Wow, I even say her name and it's like you bit into a rotten, it's like somebody opened, as soon as I say her name, it's like somebody opened Tupperware with like 17-day-old food in it. You're like, ugh. I had Lebitard and his clown crew. I could see them saying that this is a good thing, right? That somebody got tutted and corrected, and I just don't like it that a black employee showed assertiveness in the workplace when that's not what happened here. I hope he shows assertive. I would love it if he got along with that owner enough that they could duke it out. And that I hope Mayo is empowered to be like, no, I'm making this decision. Like, man, that would be awesome. And I hope the guy kicks ass at the job as much as I hate the team. But just this kind of, you don't know how to pronounce black names, so that says something about you. And I can besmirch that in front of people and everyone will cheer me on. Come on. That's not constructive at all.
How did you take his comment about seeing race?
I think it's perfectly fine. I think it makes sense. I think not seeing, I always, like when I was in high school and stuff and quote unquote PC, the whole PC lexicon was coming into, like I was seeing reverberations of that even in high school. And over the years, it seems like the two sort of pole positions are, I don't see race is criticized as someone who is being willfully blind in a way that's too convenient, right? Like it's people sort of cutting a corner and not doing the work to actually grapple with racism and race issues. It's like, well, I don't see color. And of course the answer is, well, you can afford not to. I don't have a problem with somebody being like, no, I acknowledge race. I saw a little bit of that comment. I don't have the full context, but I don't think that unto itself that there's anything there's any problem with somebody doing that. I kind of wish we would all be more upfront. Of course, though, there's a way to say you don't see race that is paying lip service to the safe, expected, pandering thing to say. And if that's what he was doing, then it means it's meaningless.
Well, just to add the context, because I went back and looked at it. He was being asked about being the first Black Patriots head coach, and whether race, whether seeing race, what part his race would play in his role,
Mm-hmm.
and
Welcome you.
and whether trying to think the exact phrasing of it, but essentially if basically if it would help him, which is a weird question to ask at a press conference like that. It tells you really the sign of the times. Like, I don't think that kind of question would have, when Tony Dungy got his job at Lovie Smith, I'm not his first job. I'm not sure we'd have that kind of conversations in the 90s or 2000s.
We wouldn't have the etiquette of the time wouldn't have allowed for it. But now, if they meant would it help him relate to the players, I don't see a problem. Or did they mean would it help him?
It's a press
job
conference
or something.
It's a press conference. I think I think they meant relate to the players, but it's a press conference, so the questions aren't going to be super in depth. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've done one of those. I've done
Mm-hmm.
a billion of them. They are. You are very often going off the top of your head, and sports ones are the worst because you often get to talk about blah 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 blah. Talk about how you feel about being the first Black coach of the Patriots, and that's the kind of this question was a bit more nuanced than that,
Mm-hmm.
but it was in that kind of timbre.
Okay, I mean, yeah. What did you think of his answer?
I agree with him.
Mm.
I think that look, race matters, but it's one of a slew of things that matter.
Well, and it also matters because it matters to some people. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like
that's one of the reasons.
You can't not factor it in when it's the first thing that certain people factor in.
Well, anyone who's watching this knows I'm Black and you are racially ambiguous, polyracial.
I'm transracial. No, that's not true. I'm just kidding.
Okay. Yeah. But, look, that helps shape your experience. It's one of the things that helps shape your experience. It's not the only thing.
And people see it.
Yeah, just not acknowledging that it is a thing that's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
It shouldn't be everything. If you're claiming, as a lot of people do, that hey, your race is you're this race, therefore you are that. And I'm like, what is that? Like that's a lot of different things. My perspective, my personality, my everything is one shade of blackness, but it's not the only shade. There's a lot of different ones. Jason Whitlock is a lot different than Stephen A, which is a lot different than even a Jamel Hill,
Mm-hmm.
which is a lot different than Ta-Nehisi Coates, which is a lot different than a Glenn Lowry, who's a lot different than a Clarence Thomas, who's a lot different than James Brown here, who's a lot different than the other James Brown. Like we're some of the shades are similar. Ibram Kendi and I have some shared background. That doesn't mean we're the same. I mean, and I think that we've had this stretch in history where, and it's been one of the longest tail thing about the Black experience in America, where there's always been one part of Black America pointing at the rest of us, say, "Hey, get in line, you're this."
Mm.
And I've always found that distasteful.
Mm-hmm.
And so I say all that to set up that it is one trait of a series of traits. And those ingredients, you blend them up and you produce an individual.
I
And that's
wonder.
how we address people.
I'm curious to get your perspective on this, whether football coaches are less inclined to buy into the current race orthodoxy because they live in a meritocracy and they're surrounded by Black people who they have to judge according to their abilities. And so I wonder whether they're less likely to play along with this. I mean, we see players doing it,
Yeah,
like Ryan Clark and
sure.
so many others.
But Ryan Clark's also been in the media for a long time.
Yes, enough to
Point.
be
I don't know.
to know
I
he
don't know
knows
if
where his
Ryan
bread is
Clark,
buttered.
yeah, I don't know if Ryan Clark as a player, who knows if he would have the same opinions. Maybe he would, maybe he wouldn't.
I mean, he's also older now, so maybe he's. But everybody who's trying to exist in that space understands they have to play along with this to a certain degree. We're not getting true reflections of their individual perspective. We're getting safety. Mina Kimes, safe.
Yeah, of course, of course.
They know they've got to play between the lines. But I don't know that coaches can even afford to think that way. So when he says, "Yeah, I see race," I kind of automatically give him the benefit of the doubt that he means that in a different way than, say, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar would say
Yeah.
that now.
I would bet that's accurate. That his perspective on it is different than Kareem's. That he's not like coming from that jaundiced, for lack of a better term, point of view. Also, we're talking about men of very, very different, once again, ages. I mean, Jerod Mayo is, I don't know if he's 40. Yeah, he's not 40, I don't think. I think he's 37, a little bit younger than me.
Yeah, because Kraft is thinking, yo, if I could have this guy for another 20 years, keep kicking ass, I'm sure he'd love that.
And Kareem is in his 60s or 70s now. So
but Kareem,
they grew up very differently.
But Kareem has jumped in with both feet. He's one of those people who I think has misinterpreted the current race discourse as the next and a more effective iteration of civil rights discourse, and has completely stumped. Like, his columns are really predictable. I know I've shared some of them with you, and you've made a face, snorted at them. There's no depth or thought there. It's very safe. So I wonder, they're very different in ages and backgrounds, etc. But I just wonder whether a basketball player versus a football coach, where football is like you scrape and claw for everything you got, whoever the fuck you are, is. And he even went further and said, if you're handicapped, or I don't know if that's the term he used, but I see you whatever you are. And I thought that was cool.
Well, let me show the clip. I don't have the full question, but I do have the clip.
I do see color, because I believe if you don't see color, you can't see racism. And whatever happens, black, white, disabled person, I've always, even someone with disabilities, I always, for the most part, people are like, don't, when they're young, they kind of make the spot hot. Younger people know what that means. But what I would say is, like, no, I want you to be able to go up to those people and really understand those people. So it goes back to whatever it is, black, white, yellow, it really doesn't matter, but it does matter so we can try to fix a problem that we all know we have.
I mean, it was a pretty vanilla answer. And is that the thing that got people like Matt Walsh and Clay Travis all hot and bothered? And
Yes,
he's in a bunch. I mean,
that is a different angle to this that I'd love to go into after you finish your thought there.
I mean, listen, let's sign Clay Travis and Jamel Hill up on Saby's cruise. They get this month's 2 tickets because, I mean, this performative tribal shit is just so lacking in any substance. It's like WWE at this point.
Without a doubt. That's not my total take on it, but that's a large chunk of it. Certainly, it is incredibly performative. It is predictable. It is, and I think for the tribes that go to Clay Travis, they go to Jamel Hill, they go to Jason Whitlock, they go to all these people to react to news and information. It was Rush Limbaugh back in the day. For some people, it's Rachel Maddow. For others, it's Tom Hartman. They rely on these people to have their take that they know is coming on news and information. It's comfort food.
It's like throw me a bone, basically, so I can chew on. I'll watch you chew on it and satisfy myself. And you know what's interesting and comical and frustrating about this is that, so I thought that was a pretty vanilla, safe thing to say. I also thought it was a really difficult question that he could have tripped over in so many different ways. And I thought he handled it pretty gracefully by sort of not saying all that much. If you really peel that back, it doesn't say that much. It's just like, I kind of just want to see you where you are.
Want me to replay it?
No.
Okay.
And the people who are like, oh my God, he's bringing race into the equation. How racist is he? It's like they give the Jamel Hills of the world, and I should say, even though James makes his sour milk rotten food face every time I say Jamel Hill's name, look at the face. It's like involuntary at this point.
Awful.
She's what?
She's awful.
I have to say,
She's not even good at it.
I am a one-time fan of hers.
I know.
And I can't rock with where she's at now, though. She's become a complete cartoon. But somebody responding to Jerod Mayo's press conference and that statement angrily, like, oh my God, look how racist he's, it's like, well, then that gives the Jamels of the world like ammunition to be like, see, look at these fucking racist buffoons.
Yeah, of course.
And it works in reverse. Because people like Lebitard, and we could come up with so many examples, who say this outlandish, ridiculous shit, they then give ammunition to the other team to be like, oh my God, look at these libtards, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, people, why are we becoming caricatures? Like Jamel Hill went from somebody, I know you don't feel this way, but I thought she was insightful. I thought she was interesting. I thought she and Michael Smith had awesome chemistry. I loved their show. I rock with Michael Smith and Michael Holley, even though if they heard this show, they probably hate me. But
yeah, and but for the record, I got no issue with Michael Smith.
But it's like this rhetoric, and I just talked for 2 hours and 40 minutes did my own podcast on this in the context of music journalism. It turns people generic. It like flattens everything so much that you can't bring your actual personality or perspective to the table, which I think is a crying shame. think Jamel became God, like something you would have scripted. And Levitard is another one. I mean, he's so safe, right? It's like he knows exactly what to say so that they don't come after him, basically. You're talking about a Cuban guy from Miami
Mm-hmm.
pandering to this. There's undoubtedly people in his family or who he grew up around who are the fucking like hyper exaggerated polar opposite of the shuck and jive shit that he does on his show, which I make a rotten food face every time I think of him. Likable guy, but his contrived persona is so disgusting to me. The way he panders. And it's like, yo, man, like you got a perspective to bring. Like, why can't you just lean into that? You're on your own now, too. You don't need to. He doesn't have to answer to anybody.
Oh, contraire. I think you missed something.
I just got sent to media studies detention for saying that. Probably.
Yes. He's on his own. He's got to do it more. Narrow and deep. He and the folks over at Meadowlark have made a decision that they are going to make a left-leaning sports media company.
Let's call it Team Blue because
okay, let's call
it's not actually a coherent sense of leftism. It's this fucking warped, ridiculous.
Agreed. Yeah, right. Yeah.
And the same thing exists in conservative Team Blue to the Team Red. Is the same thing.
If you look at Outkick is Team Red. Is it coherent? No. I mean, you listen to Dan Dockish and you listen to Clay Travis. They are vaguely conservative Republican-ish.
But they're throwing meat to a certain push, but they're pushing buttons like satisfying the reflex. They're not even thinking of it that deeply. They're just like, we know what's going to get the dogs to bark, kind of a thing.
For sure. And while I mentioned Outcast, my Outkick, not Outcast, Outkick. Outkick is my favorite part of Outkick, and I mean this sincerely, is Bobby Burack. I think Bobby Burack is one of the best media writers in the country. I think the guy, he is writing from a perspective. It is definitely a conservative lean, a Team Red lean, but his analysis of media is very sharp.
Which is all we want, right? You can still be you.
Absolutely.
Just don't present something that refracts light through your prism in a way that then I can't see the light for what it is. I'm cool with you coming from where you're coming from, but just give me analysis.
Agreed. I mean, I look at two and these aren't so much sports people, but Philip Bump of the Washington Post and Tom Friedman out of the New York Times. They're both excellent at what they do. They're clearly coming from a left perspective. Doesn't really matter. I mean, it doesn't matter how I feel or whether I agree with them or disagree with them. It's about them making an argument that's coherent.
Yes.
And interesting.
And you can fill in the blanks as far as where their bias is tilting that argument without feeling cheated or without feeling lied to or misled. That's
and I think
is that too much to ask? Is that so wrong?
I think it could be a lefty sports show columnist and do that. It's not done often. Like it's not done on the right often.
No.
Because it's really easy to just hang on to the tropes and just regurgitate those tropes, and you're going to get an audience. And you're going to get acclaim, and you get a pat on the back, and everything's going to be fine.
And the issue with Whitlock is that he's always chasing some controversy.
Yes.
Going out of his way to provoke one without really having a grounded sense of where his ideological. He would tell you he has a very grounded sense that he cares about
the biblical worldview.
Biblical worldview, but that doesn't map onto a worldview
Yeah.
in a way that makes any sense at all. And he's always just sort of digging, and occasionally, not occasionally, often will dig something out that's like amazing and
Mhm.
makes a great argument. But I've always said he doesn't have an overview.
Mhm.
And
Yeah. He's not fully realized. And maybe he needs to, he's only been doing Fearless Daily 3 years, 2 years.
mhm, mhm.
Maybe he needs to do it another 5 years, and it crystallizes eventually.
I mean, if he
I was
doesn't attack everybody first.
I was reading Rush Limbaugh's book,
Mm,
uh, The Way Things Ought to Be,
mm,
and he was talking about like I have this array of a bunch of media books I got, and a bunch of like I love autobiographies too. So
mm,
and since I was thinking about a piece that I wanted to do on him, and juxtaposing him and Tucker Carlson's recent choices, and so I said, oh, I should see if he had a book. So I went and pick up the book,
nice.
and it's interesting, and he's talking about basically his perspective and how over time of that repetition of being in a small cold room alone with a microphone, provoking
Mhm.
reactions, and sometimes not getting the reaction that he wanted or that he thought he was going to get, and how that sort of forced him to like mold his sort of life political philosophy,
Mm,
and the repetition of just doing it daily,
mm,
just made him sharper.
mm.
um and to some people more repugnant, but
Sure.
I think especially if you're going to do a point of view show of any type where you're talking using your opinions, you're going to definitely inspire some people. Some people are gonna tune into this and they're gonna hate my face or
Mhm.
my voice.
I think
But
arouse people is arouse reactions is a more
yes,
accurate term.
definitely, it's gonna arouse reactions. And he realized, Limbaugh realized that that first and foremost, it was more important that he did a show that aroused those reactions first. That was first and foremost.
No
That
surprise.
and sort of getting his coherent world together was something that his harder core people, the people who were with him daily, would put together by sitting at under his learning tree over time.
Hmm.
Um, and I think perhaps a guy like Whitlock just needs the reps to sort of like put it together and work out his own contradictions, because there's plenty of them.
I don't know that he wants to. Um, and the thing that he would say, which I think would be fair, he's actually an excellent broadcaster. He's
Yeah.
really, really good at just monologuing and
Well,
interviewing too, like which that surprised me.
he was a sports talk radio host.
And he does,
He did a
I
bunch of TV as well.
right, yes. And when he throws around that he was a journalist, like he does seem to have like actual journalistic skill.
I don't disagree. I have trouble with calling what he's doing now journalism.
No. But you see
does.
echoes of those skills though.
Yeah. Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
And it's just like the problem with him is like what I was saying before. He's become such a pro wrestling character, and
Mhm.
now he's just taking shots at everybody willy nilly. He doesn't even, first, and he'll turn on people all the
Mhm.
time.
His Royce White fallout.
Right. And initially he was on Shannon Sharp after he left Skip, and then he started making fun of Skip, and now he's complimenting Shannon Sharp all the time. It just sounds very confused.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, I got to give Shannon props. It's like, I get it. He's saying that he's calling it down the middle, but it just comes off as somebody who will attack you 1 minute and then praise you another. And this is the thing that's been the claim that's been made against him on a personal level by so many people. He's definitely left a trail of destruction, and I think you and I are in no position to judge here. Like, I actually relate to that personality type. And as somebody who I've also many times fired off at people who are peers simply on the principle that I didn't like what they were saying, and then I've had to reap the consequences of like, oh shit, I fucked up this relationship.
Sure.
It comes off as a little bit unstable, right? I know I can look at myself in the past and do that and go, oh wow. Now lots of people do this now. People take shots at each other in the same lane all the time in media and in sports and everything. But it gives people ammo to say he's just a bitter person who hates black people and wants to attack them, when that's not actually, if you look at the points he's making, he's almost always raising a fair point. Almost always.
I don't think it's so much. I think that's a cheap punch.
Lots of people taking it.
Yeah. But it's a cheap one. And I didn't find, I watched the full Whitlock and Stephen A interaction. I don't find either one all that interesting.
You mean their episodes, the specifically
about each other?
Yes. Yeah, right. It was
I found it kind of blah. There were entertaining moments, but blah. What was interesting was in the nearly 2 hours that Stephen A dedicated to Whitlock,
he never answered his
and he never said he was wrong.
He just made a lot of fucking noise to get you off the trail and had this waiting in his back pocket the whole time in case of emergency, break glass, in case you motherfucker starts to close in on me. I'm going to push the nuke button as a way of making a lot of noise and creating a diversion to get away from the fact that that dude caught me lying.
Yeah, and I don't know that he did. It certainly seems like he did lie about this.
Something's off. Marcellus said, I'm not saying he's lying, but he certainly didn't tell the truth.
yeah. I think that's well said. That's absolutely well said.
Something doesn't add up, and how come there's no pictures? There's just one picture.
And don't you think Stephen A, of all people, a guy who logs as much TV time around basketball and talking basketball as he has, don't you think he'd want to flaunt some of that? It's and for those who don't understand, it's Jason Whitlock and Stephen A. Smith are peers who were fighting back and forth and still are currently about whether Stephen A. Smith actually played basketball at Winston-Salem State, HSBU, historically black college. I always get the acronym wrong. So, and Stephen A. claimed that he played basketball there until he broke his kneecap. And it's pretty unclear whether he actually did or not.
And then claimed that Clarence Big House Gaines?
Big House Gaines, yeah, his coach. And I think that I don't know for a fact, but that's the most
outlandish
thing I've ever heard.
The most what sounding thing?
Fictitious.
Yes. That he made 27 straight jump shots and Big House Gaines in a high school scrimmage.
It just wouldn't happen.
And Big House Gaines offered him a scholarship on the spot. That's a fucking lie.
Yeah. That's not how scholarships work. And it's not how scholarships worked in the 80s or the 90s.
Nobody's called this motherfucker out on that.
Well,
until now.
It's not been a center spoke to his rise.
But you have to think that some, especially these NBA dudes, they know he's bullshitting.
Well, also, he spent a lot of airtime with Jalen Rose, who called out Skip Bayless while he was on air with him.
Yes,
with something very similar.
Yes. By the way, go ahead. Sorry.
Which we actually talked about on another live stream.
We did, and I've always said to this day, even though Jalen downplays it now, he was also giving Stephen A shit too. Like that episode was not straight. Yes, it was Jalen torpedoed Skip, and I thought rightfully so. But it was more of a three-way argument, and Skip and Stephen A were kind of on the same side of it. It has been sort of but this happens all the time, and it drives me crazy. Something gets remembered one way, and it's but no, right. He could have at any time pulled like fucking just nuked dude right on the spot, just like flamethrowered him. Been like, oh yeah, what did you do at Winston-Salem State, bitch?
Well, I think after he did that with Skip, my guess is that behind the scenes backlash, the fact that it actually led him back on air to come back and essentially apologize and make up with him, I think that probably is the thing that prevented that.
Well, and also Mina Kimes said on Dan Le Batard's show, she said this tactfully, but she said that when you go into First Take now, that Stephen A is like, he's
king of the castle.
The king, yeah. You know how far not to go in challenging him. Which I thought was an interesting admission, but it's pretty obvious. Only JJ Redick seemed to cross over that line. But yeah, I mean, this is the thing. I think you can sum up Whitlock, and it's unfortunate, much like Jordan Peterson. He creates a persona for himself that makes it easy for people to take surface level shots at him. And he also seems to not be fully composed as far as what his actual values are, while loudly trumpeting a value system that is much more simplistic and sort of inadequate than what you think you're getting. But in his defense, so much of his basic instinct as a commentator is that I think if I could sum him up in a nutshell, it's that he feels that the infantilization of the black athlete actually hurts black people. I do think there is an actual ethical streak to where he's coming from. And all these people are like, oh, he's just a coon. He's just a sellout. He loves attacking black people. And, you get your Rick Stroms and your, always default to this. He's just somebody that white conservative racists love. So he's tap dancing for them, which I think is horseshit. I think he feels genuinely, and I can't speak for him, that making all of these accommodations for black people in the name of a progressive, quote unquote, value system that is antithetical to Christianity is destructive. And I also feel kind of like, I can't speak for you, but I know I've had this temptation many times. When you see somebody in your same lane who you think is a clown and a fraud, he likes to take shots at him. And I think he recognizes that Stephen A has actually done leaps and bounds more damage to black people, I think. And he hasn't said that. But he recognizes Stephen A as a poisonous snake in the grass. And I think he doesn't respect his journalistic credentials or his acumen about sports. So he's basically like, "Fuck you. You're not in my league." And that's where this comes from. Stephen A is a very, very duplicitous. I mean, nothing the guy says is honest. There's always this
I don't
attempt
think
to obfuscate.
if that is the motivation or even remotely part of the motivation for Jason Whitlock, I would be surprised, because many of the things I've heard Jason Whitlock say, I would wonder if they were actually honest.
Hmm.
I think that comes with that kind of job and playing in that kind of lane. I do think he's more honest than Stephen A.
Mm-hmm.
But whether he's fully honest or
yeah, I mean, he's created a character, and you kind of have to like.
I think the pro wrestling character you mentioned earlier, I would call it a cartoon, or Mark Maron called it a clown. He said that comedians have a clown. Another friend of mine and I used to call our dating persona our representative. It's you through a funhouse mirror.
Mm-hmm.
It is you. It's an exaggeration of you. It plays down certain features. So I would hope that you're wrong, at least on that part. I do want to hit on one of the other parts of your argument, though. Was your argument that Stephen A is poisonous to Black people, or that Jason Whitlock feels that Stephen A is poisonous to Black people? Is that your
I think I say Stephen A has done more harm to Black people.
Elaborate.
The Kwame Brown example is, to me, the most egregious. I know that's just one guy, but he has masqueraded himself as, he'll say, as a black man, and you have pointed out in previous, we talked about this 7 years ago, I think.
Yeah, a long time ago.
You pointed out to me, you didn't think you thought he was kind of apolitical and not really out there for much but himself.
Yeah.
And so he presents as if he really cares about that. And he has no qualms about savaging athletes in a way that I think is in totally poor taste. Now, Whitlock criticizes athletes too, but Stephen A and Skip Bayless are more or less the same person.
I would agree with that.
It's just that the network invented or capitalized on this racial dynamic.
Yeah.
So that they would each be playing sort of to different audiences, and that they would each, and I don't think ESPN would ever admit this. My guess, just speculating, is that they knew that each party would play into the prejudices and sense of antagonism. So like white viewers would kind of recoil at Stephen A's shtick and go, "Oh my God, that's very Black for me," thinking that that's Black, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even though Stephen A is just very animated. I should say I'm also a fan of Stephen A's too. I mean, the guy's fucking entertaining.
Yeah, and even though I'm probably going to end up defending Stephen A, I am not really a fan at all.
Right. Interesting. He is a fantastic podcaster, solo podcaster.
Yeah.
I don't like his show. I think First Take is bullshit. I think all he does is bluster, and it's like not even entertaining and funny. He seems like he's going through the motions. It's like a Vegas routine. I don't believe it at all. But I think his podcast is it, and will be around for a long time. But
once again, sports talk radio.
But he's
a lot of hard hours by yourself in a room. You figure it out.
And he's honed that craft to a T. So I think that they contrived this setup where the Black audience sitting in a barbershop would have somebody like Skip, who they view as kind of a stereotype kind of alien, and that they could direct their antagonism and go, "Oh my God, that he's so ridiculous," and relate to Stephen A. and vice versa, and that Stephen A. would be this comic book version of blackness in the eyes of a white audience that had not had much exposure. Because Stephen A. really is more of his own personality. He's not really the stereotype of blackness. If you really,
Yeah,
if he were like a comedian, he has his own shtick.
Yeah.
But it's noisy, it's loud, it's demonstrative, it's absurd. It's got a little bit of swag, but it's self-deprecating, it's goofy. It's kind of reminds you of George Jefferson a little bit. Sort of.
A lot of George Jefferson.
So I think they set that up for people playing off of people's racial lack of familiarity and racial antagonism and kind of subliminal racial animus. And Stephen A. has played that to a T, which is why some people refer to him as a coon. I just think he's super fucking harsh on black athletes in a way that has zero conscientiousness to it. He's full of shit when he's talking about as a black man. His thing with Kyrie, I think, is even more egregious than what he did to Kwame. And I think what he did to Kwame is like a cardinal sin in my book. I think that was really fucking foul. It was gross. It was a real abuse of the power of media. And I'm glad Kwame fought back and built his own brand. Fuck you. But the thing with Kyrie, probably even worse. So, fuck him.
And the vaccine, you mean?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I pull no punches anymore about being my opposition to the COVID jabs. That's not something I'm even remotely interested in keeping close to the vest at this point. I'm out front with that shit now.
Okay, let me back up a bit. I don't think that I don't deny that Stephen A. probably, you could argue that he's made some damage to black people. You could argue that question.
Or specific black people.
Specifically, for sure. I mean, I think especially the way he goes hard at people and has gone hard at people, not just black people, but people, period. Without a doubt, I can't deny any of that. But black people as in macro, I don't think that's true.
But compare Whitlock, Skip Bayless, and Stephen A. Who has done more harm? I would say Stephen A.
I'd say none of the above.
Yes, because you would say that these are the people in my daytime soaps for men world that I care too much about.
Yeah.
You're basically saying I'm doing the same as reading adult comic books, but just sports stuff. Yeah.
That's what they are. I mean, look, I think that these are not important figures in black culture.
Even
Whitlock? Even Whitlock. I say that Whitlock, these are people. What Whitlock is trying to do is corner a new frontier. He's important to black broadcasters more than he is black, the larger black culture. He's doing something that I haven't really seen before. You could argue Larry Elder was in that crowd, but even Larry Elder wasn't this. Larry Elder wasn't having basically a freaking rally, and he wasn't.
We should have tried to go. We should have tried to go to cover that.
I'm sure there's going to be another one this year.
We got to go.
Yeah, it's worth it. It's certainly worth it.
Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I'd love to see how it actually sounds, what it's actually like. To the vibe of it would be very interesting to see. He's trying to create a black Glenn Beck, and yes, he's part of the Blaze.
No, but I know you're making that analogy based on more than just that.
Yes, it is trying to. One of the things that Glenn Beck has done since the late aughts is try to use his audience as sort of a, not just to contribute to good causes, quote unquote, whatever you think those are, but to get to use them as an activist base.
Yeah, mobilize them politically.
Yes. But in the case of Whitlock, he's not so much trying to mobilize them politically. It's more socially.
Mm-hmm.
It's more trying to spread his feelings about a biblical worldview and trying to, and what it means to be a man, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's lots of definitions to that as well. You know, much like there's many shades of blackness, there's many shades of that. And when it comes to black men in media, this is where the Stephen A. Whitlock kind of, you know, corollary is interesting. Stephen A. is in many ways the standard bearer of what stuff was like.
Mm.
And obviously he's dominating now.
Mm-hmm.
Whitlock is trying to say then there's more.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Over here, you know, when it comes to whether it's right-wing talk radio, there's not many black faces in that world either. Or right-wing podcasting, not many. There's a few. I think of Brandon Tatum. I don't know if
I know who it is. The Officer
one
Tatum.
example of this. Colian Noir is another
Right.
person in that world. Obviously,
Are you talking about?
He was an NRA guy.
Right. No, Colin Noir's the NRA guy. I know, but are you talking about the Officer Tatum?
Yes.
Yeah,
And he now has a nightly talk show on radio.
Mm-hmm. There's several on YouTube as well. There are several, but
Yeah.
I know
But it's not a herd.
Right.
And Whitlock could easily go that way.
Mm-hmm.
But instead he's chosen this sort of middle way where he's focused on this social, family, religious goulash, which makes him unique. It also makes it hard. It also is distasteful. And I think getting back to one of your points you made earlier about, you know, people taking shots at him, and so many different people. If you're Jamel Hill, if you're Michael Smith, if you're Dan Le Batard, if you're people who don't share a lot of what he's preaching, you're looking over there and like, what's wrong with this man? Like, why would he throw it all away? Because I do believe, and I think there was a direct quote from a Fox Sports president that Jason Whitlock was welcome back. Like they wanted him back.
Right.
They didn't want to jettison him.
So this whole idea that Stephen A. has always been leaning on, that, you know, Whitlock could failed. You and I have talked about this before. The dude would get another job offer. He's going to survive.
Yeah, it's harder now. I think it's harder now.
But he's had like 9 lives.
Without a doubt.
And
he's good at what he does.
Yes. And
it's a rare bunch that are people, period. That's as good as he is at what he is, as provoking people that will provoke Stephen A. to rant at him for 2 hours. Right. It's a level of skill at making an argument that I think that you gotta recognize. So I think it is tough, I think, for a guy like Stephen A. to accept that that's the truth of it.
Yes. So he has to keep saying, "Oh, I'm number one. I'm number one. I'm number one. I'm number one." He just sounds so unconvincing, always telling himself that. Stephen A. just comes across as deeply insecure. I'm never convinced when he brags like that. It just sounds so empty. And the thing is, Whitlock has said this. Y'all can't understand that I fucking walked away.
Yeah.
because I have different things that have value to me.
Without a doubt.
Now, with his, and look, I don't mean to take shots at him either, because I have a ton of respect for him as a media force. Like I said, the guy is like indestructible. He's walked away from more jobs than you and I could dream of ever having. if
Or
you
been
think about it.
fired.
Yeah, well, right.
Both.
And then been
Right.
invited back.
Yeah. The ESPN thing example is hilarious.
I
So the fact
mean,
that they would even bring him back, and then I don't know that he could come back a third time. I doubt it.
I really doubt it. But they gave him the undefeated. I mean, that
Yeah.
was
It was a prestige thing. From what I remember at the time, it was reported that Stephen A. did want it, and that was part of their animus.
and it would not have been
Wilbon
the
wanted it too.
disaster. It wouldn't have been the disaster that I don't remember who it was who said it in this back and forth.
Mhm.
Maybe it was Jamel, maybe it was Lebitard who was like, "Oh my God," giving him the undefeated, or on one of his episodes.
Mhm.
I think he was genuinely trying to look for a variety of voices. I think he asked Ta-Nehisi Coates, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he did approach him.
So that, to me, that's interesting, because that's not what he's doing now. He's definitely stumping. He's found his found his genre, and he's
creating his genre.
But the thing is he basically creating his Juggalo camp?
Yeah.
Is that basically?
It's interesting how these threads tie together. All right, because how we were talking about Lebitard earlier,
Mhm.
and I said narrow and deep.
Mhm.
That's what the Juggalo camp was. That's what they're trying to create at Meadowlark.
Mm.
That's what Whitlock in the whole Blaze world is. That's what the Daily Wire world is. That's what the whole Outkick, in a broader Fox
That's what
News world.
Barstool is.
Barstool fits that world as well. Yeah, it's a narrow and deep. You're trying to have your Juggalo camp. Yeah, absolutely. That's what everybody's trying to do. That's what from the New York Times to
the James Brown Times.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
I'd love to have I know the Fifth Column does this. I know Smoke 'em If You Got 'em does this one as well. They do live
Retreats?
Zooms. They have Zooms where they have a bunch of people, and they just one of the other shows I listen to is Counterflow.
Okay.
With Buck Johnson. He's a libertarian dude. I wish he wouldn't talk so much about religion, but he does. He talks
Interesting.
too much for me. He's Orthodox Christian,
Wow.
but I listen to his show. It's fascinating.
It's
He
a
has a lot
fascinating
of
combination.
but I love libertarian Orthodox Christian dude.
That is fascinating sounding.
And a lot of interesting guests, and I end up just listening, and I shout out to Buck Johnson. I listen to you all the time. But he does that as well, where instead of just putting everything out there, he's developed this small audience, and he is talking to them. They have these big Zooms where they all sit in a room. He'll bring in a guest, and it never sees the light of day.
It's a cottage industry, like I always compare it to a bakery, as you know. That's what I aspire to, is to have my clientele who come in for the cakes and pastries I make and rock with me. And what I love about this time period we're in is that there's something really wholesome about all of these people trying to create little communities.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that. I think there's a good naturedness to this that I really enjoy, and we would very much love you and I to both have that. And it's like, you're not just doing a job. You're not just on radio, you were speaking out kind of into a void. Yeah, you would get calls, but there was this humongous gap between you and the audience. And now everyone's cultivating groups, pods.
Also, yeah, very much so, and for better or for worse. I think there's a larger societal discussion that I don't want to do now, but I could make about it. So I'll put a pin in that, and I'll dedicate a bunch of time to that one because I want to articulate that clearly. I think that I think there's larger societal trends at play. We obviously had the COVID acceleration, but I'll put that aside for the moment. But
yeah, I just don't think it's all a diminishing return. I do think we're getting some returns, some great things back. But
no,
yes,
I don't think it's diminishing returns. I would agree. We're getting a lot of great things back. I think we're getting some bad things back too. But I think it's, especially once advertisers and there's lots of great news for podcasters and advertising that basically that major media buyers are finally getting it. They're finally understanding that, hey, I can talk to people who talking about libertarian and orthodox Christian issues.
I mean, what a focus group's target fucking advertising. It's like pre-made for you.
Yeah,
right?
Totally. Yeah, and that's what podcasts are. They're a predefined niche, right? If people who want, if people who see this thumbnail, right, and they see I was wrong about the Peacock game, SI fires everyone in GQ and Pitchfork, they know exactly the kind of world they're walking into.
Yeah, it's like an advertiser's dream. Other than
Right.
we need the numbers, but I'm not gonna.
Yeah.
You've got decent numbers, but
not enough.
Right, but you're way ahead than me. So I was gonna say I'm not gonna impugn your numbers. Mine are a joke,
Yeah.
but no, that's and basically, if we're gonna put a cap on this, the new media landscape is the rise of the juggalos.
Yeah, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
They were ahead of their time if you think about it.
Yeah. They absolutely
Holy
were.
shit.
Yeah, that's another piece. That needs to be a thing that has to be fleshed out. That's another, I'm putting a pin in that as well.
And just to bring this totally full circle, in passing, one of those dudes, I think Violent 2 Dope or whatever, was on a podcast. Violent 2 J or whatever was on a podcast with Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yeah, of course. Why not?
So I got to watch that. But I mean, it was probably cool. It's like, yeah.
All right. But before I let you go, I want to touch on these two topics because I think these worlds, the SI and GQ, those worlds are quite intertwined.
Right. And Jamel tweeted, it's a shame that she dreamed of writing for Sports Illustrated. And then lots of people in my lane were sad and upset about the Pitchfork thing.
Well, let me start with SI because SI is more. This just happened yesterday. Once again, anybody who's interested in media, if you're not following Sarah Fisher over at Axios, you should be. She's fantastic, and clearly distillates complicated media stories in a way that a lot of people don't. With SI, we're talking about one of the dumbest decisions I've heard of in media in a long time. A couple years ago, I realized that the Arena Group and Authentic Brands were taking over SI because SI was going bankrupt.
Okay.
What I did not realize is that they did not buy SI. I'll read this first paragraph for the people who are listening to this. Most of Sports Illustrated's unionized staff were laid off Friday after its parent company, the Arena Group, failed to make a $3.75 million quarterly payment to the group. It licenses
Sports Illustrated's brands from.
They don't own it. All right. Here's why this is incredibly dumb. There's a number of reasons, but I'll zoom in on a couple. So it's like building a house on a sinking piece of land.
Mm.
You don't own the foundation. We know when you buy a house, you're not simply just buying the house, you're buying the land that it's under. All right. So essentially what they were doing, they were renting the name Sports Illustrated
Mm.
and building their business on top of it. And my assumption, because they decided that they were going to restructure last year and that they were laying off people and that there was a sort of very, very, tight ad market last year, that perhaps they weren't making as much money as they thought.
Mm.
And they couldn't afford to make this quarterly payment to use the Sports Illustrated name. So in response, what they decided to do yesterday was lay off their entire unionized workforce, which is basically everybody.
But then where do they go from here with this brand?
It's a very good question.
So they built a house on a squishy foundation and then burned the house down?
Yeah.
Or took out all the support beams and unscrewed everything so the house falls down? Like, what's your next move?
Well, the presumption is that the Authentic Brands, who owns
Sports Illustrated,
the logo and the branding and the website and all that they will license it to somebody else. But I'm a writer.
Who's gonna run it?
Well, I'm a writer, and you're a writer too. Would you work for a place like that?
No, unless they gave me a lot of money up front. I'd be like, yo, sign me up for salary, but give me some up front.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Like, oh, what do you mean? You don't like own any of this? Like you're just renting this stuff?
So
you
weird.
You want me to just commit my fate to you? Like you want me to turn over my career to you? But you guys don't run this stuff. Like,
wow. And it's like they got to start from scratch with a total overhaul.
Yes.
Of the entire staff, which means
maybe they could bring people back. Maybe they would. I don't know. I wouldn't.
You wouldn't bring people back, or you wouldn't go back?
I wouldn't go back.
Hmm.
I'd try to bring people. If I were licensing, if I had the 3.75 million and I was licensing the Sports Illustrated name, I would definitely try to bring some of the people back at minimum. But I don't know. I would think that would be incredibly, incredibly hard sell.
But here's another question: Sports Illustrated is worth 3.75 million a quarter.
Yeah, so four times a year.
It's that profitable. It makes
that
much.
I wouldn't say that profitable.
Like, how is that even a sound investment?
Yeah, I think if I were them, I would have started from scratch. But instead of doing that. Or you know what? I would have kept the entire staff and just make sports media or sportsmagazine.com.
Right. This is the reboot of pitch it as a reboot.
Yeah.
Of SI, but you couldn't get the name. There was legal wrangling. Also,
create something from scratch.
Also, these employees, did they even have a fucking clue that they weren't working for the actual? Oh man.
Well, maybe. That part, I thought you were asking a different question. They didn't have a clue this was happening, that they were all going to be laid off until yesterday. They heard there were rumblings over the last few weeks that they didn't make because they didn't make the payment early in the year. The payment was due at the first of the year. So the rumblings that something behind the scene was happening, but nobody was expecting everybody to go. But did they have a clue that it wasn't owned by the Arena Group?
Yeah, I guess they did then.
I'm just putting myself in that place. I used to work at USA Today. I did not know explicitly and in depth their ownership structure. I had some sense of it because there were a couple layoff scares in my time there, but I did not know. I didn't know who owned the trademark.
So you could have been working for SI and not had a fucking
Quite
clue.
possibly.
Yeah.
Until the last couple weeks. Because I follow this stuff. I obsess over this stuff.
Yes.
And I didn't realize that.
So if you didn't know it.
Yeah. Like that is just dumb.
And why couldn't they borrow the money?
Well, that's where your other question about whether it's worth that a quarter comes to mind. If you're a banker and you're like, hey, this isn't worth $15 million a year just to barely make a profit. Like, when are we going to make our money back? And also there's the question of whether they have the money and they're not willing to spend it. If you don't think you're making a profit off of it, if you don't think it's worth it for your company to license this name, maybe you just don't license it.
And you just renege on the deal and you just cut everybody adrift and sink the brand while you're at it.
It's not the way I do business, but like I could see somebody making that kind of decision.
Yeah. How likely is it that they were just flat out losing money?
Very likely. Yeah, very likely. And I think this is where it ties into Pitchfork, because it's very likely they were losing money as well.
I mean, that's what their statement claimed, that they felt. I mean, you have the statement probably in the tab, right?
It just full disclosure, Saby did some work for Pitchfork.
I freelanced for them for almost 3 years, from late 2014 through late 2017.
And we'll go into this a bit. Pitchfork, one of the strongest music and news reviews publications over its 30-year online history, is being folded into men's magazine GQ. Owner Condé Nast said Wednesday. Anna Winter, the publishing house's chief content officer and global editorial director of Vogue, emailed a memo to staff. This decision was made after a careful evaluation of Pitchfork's performance in what we believe is the best path forward for the brand, so that our coverage of music can continue to thrive within the company, she wrote. Both Pitchfork and GQ have unique and valuable ways that they approach music journalism, and we are excited for the new possibilities together. How much of that is crap? And how much of that is real?
Well, I don't understand. I don't really have a conception of how these things work at that administrative level. Judging from, I mean, you and I can read that press release, and because let's see, this didn't say how much they laid people off. They laid a bunch of staff off.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, it's clear there's going to be a sea change in the whole identity of Pitchfork, or a paradigm change. They let a bunch of people off, and the response to it on Twitter among several former either people I know of or people I work directly with has been an outcry. So I mean, there's no way it's not going to change. Just from my limited understanding of how all those different parts fit. I mean, GQ, it's like they gutted the staff and put this one outlet which had its own very clearly defined identity
Mhm.
under the auspices of another outlet that has a completely different identity and is in a different. It's not even like it's another music platform,
Sure.
right? So they basically just demoted Pitchfork to like a vertical
Yeah.
of GQ
Yeah.
or downgraded it.
Yeah. I tend to agree that essentially it's now a page on GQ.com.
And what are their
Um,
priorities going to be? What is their sense of what the mission of their music coverage is going to be? They're by default, they're not going to be able to see it from the same lens where Pitchfork was all they existed in the world of music. GQ is a men's lifestyle platform.
yeah, and
Music is
that
an
alone
accessory. Music is an accessory to them.
and that alone will oh, I'm not logged in here. And that alone will change at least the investment in it for sure. I think there will be less big swings. I would think you basically have a skeleton crew. I don't know if I would think they'd keep the website up.
I hope so. I hope they don't pull a Grantland.
Well, Grantland's still up.
Oh, that's true. That's true. What is the website? Yeah, MTV Iggy is no longer. I mean, that wasn't ever huge.
Yeah,
But
that's gone.
Yeah.
But I think they'll keep it up and they'll probably ride it because like now that nobody will be working there and you're just paying for server space, it'll be just pure profit.
plus, also, yeah, right. I mean, they'll keep getting clicks. I mean, they would be imbeciles to take it down. Just leave it.
Yeah, it could. It basically becomes a content farm at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the way this ties into our previous conversation about Sports Illustrated is like what we're having is like these brands in this new world just struggling to find meaning,
Mm-hmm.
find their footing. If you had a choice between GQ and Pitchfork and you're Anna Wintour, you're going to choose GQ, I think, because GQ has more of I don't know if it's more of a moneymaker. It's from the reporting that I've seen so far, it's unclear that it makes that much more money, but it has a clearer brand. Pitchfork is sort of, yes, it is. I mean, it has a very narrow music perspective. It's not like I never really thought it's not the place that I think a lot of people would turn to for stuff that was new and coming from this generation of artists. And I'm not sure we're just broadly turning to music journalism on websites for that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're turning to platforms like this, YouTube and Rumble, or I think we're turning to podcasting. I think we're turning to newsletters. I think we're turning to a bunch of places that are not behind a gilded cage,
Well, I know that for a lot of people, it was for almost 3 decades, and I think it was successive waves of people. I don't think they all stuck it out the whole time.
Yeah, of course not.
But it was very much the appeal of the site was people would go there looking for music they hadn't heard. And they did see it as sort of the ultimate curation platform.
Yeah, but that's not how we find new music today.
Not today. And I don't think younger people who would be in tune with current artists would engage this kind of media to do that. So basically the clock was ticking.
And with the shift in terms of how people discover music changing, much like how people consume sports is changing, how you adapt to it and how you sort of find ways to tap into that audience, how that however that new generation is going to express that interest, because obviously the interest in finding new music isn't going to change. It's just a matter of like how you do it.
What the delivery system is.
And I think these outlets are woefully behind. I think people jumped them in line. I think in terms of the playlist is way more stronger, a way to find out new acts without people waxing poetically. No offense,
TikTok,
bro. TikTok is one. Yeah, TikTok is one. Or even
YouTube.
Your boy Anthony Fantano, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I'd be very curious to see what he has to say. I haven't looked it up. But I mean, he existed outside of that system entirely. He did
Yeah.
not come up in any. I mean, he worked for an NPR affiliate or
Yeah.
in a local affiliate, but other than that, he built his thing completely on his own. So you're gonna go to my tweets.
Yeah. I'd love for you to walk us through it because clearly you have a look in through the into this world and a perspective that I think is at least worth hearing from myself and nearly 6,000 other folks.
Yeah, I mean, which isn't a huge splash on Twitter, but it is. I mean, 4 people usually like my tweets. I
Yeah.
do think I was shadow banned after I tweeted against Elon Musk because it changed overnight.
Well, I would think yeah, Elon is ruthless.
And apparently thin skin, motherfucker.
Oh, without a doubt. Without a
I
doubt.
tweeted the robot scene from Alien and said that this is what it's like talking to Elon Musk about free speech. Or this is what it's like when Elon Musk talks about free speech. Remember the scene in Alien with a robot?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to do control where you create a Twitter account or an X account. You have it for, let's say, a few months, and you just like tweet normally on it, and then you make it an anti-Elon tweet and see if your reach just drops.
I mean, I didn't have much, but I had more than what I do now. But somebody retweeted this. A publicist retweeted this. And I just, before talking to you, just before lunch, did a 2-hour and 40-minute straight, almost. It was like 2 hours and 35 minutes, and then I added 7 minutes on top on this topic that I'm going to post to my YouTube.
Yeah.
So,
well, tease your page. What's your URL?
It's youtube.com/feedbackdef or feedbackdef.substack.com.
And so give us a taste. Like what were you trying to get across about Pitchfork and their business model and your feelings on it?
For me, this is a bigger story. And one thing that's lost in my tweets is that I had almost 100% positive experience writing for them. And I don't want this to come across as, oh, this must be a disgruntled former employee. I was never an employee. I was a freelancer. I've been a freelancer in the music journalism ecosystem for 21 years. But for me, this was a bigger story about a regime change.
Go on.
And in the outcry that I saw from the people I would expect, like editors there, other writers, names who I either have had some interaction with or would come across just in passing, their names, and some musicians as well. I just heard this blindness and this myopia and not grasping what's really happening here. So, I mean, I could read my tweets for people to
Yeah.
understand.
You don't have to read them. You could certainly zero in on a few of your points.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, so there's a few different layers to this for me. First of all, this corporation, this publisher, bought out Pitchfork. I can see it there in 2015. That was almost 10 years ago. And I don't know anything about Pitchfork's inner workings at the administrative level. Their sort of chain of command, at least as I experienced it as a freelancer, you were always sort of on the outside looking in. Now, I did have interaction with several different editors. And one thing I should say, which I didn't say in my YouTube, they were really, really good, shockingly good about like when you'd turn in your copy, then they would edit it, then they'd have a whole team of editors on the edit, but they would walk through very patiently my edits to their edits, which is a really exhausting process when you've got that many reviews you're cranking out a week. So I thought they were really great about that. I should add a note to my clip. But my freelancer rate went up. I was getting paid $80 a review. And then as soon as Condé Nast bought them the same week, the review rate went up to $120. Now do the math there. Think about all the content they were churning out day after day after day with all the contributors they had. Clearly there was this like big boost to their budget. I'm seeing a lot of sort of counter backlash, I guess. So there's a backlash to this announcement. And then there's a counter backlash to people saying, oh, well, they just went corporate anyway. I don't think that's entirely fair. I think they did continue to be a site that was always sort of trawling for up and coming out there music. They did bring in the poptimism thing and sort of codified this way, in my view anyway, they codified this way of talking about your Taylor Swifts and your Beyoncés with this air of academic importance.
I'd say glowing academic importance.
Yeah, I didn't care for that at all, but it didn't, I mean, I guess that was after I got there, or that was after I contributed for them. You know, I have to say, they never interfered with what I wanted to say. They never tried to shape my, like, you know, you think of Pitchfork as this sort of, as this impervious castle, and that you sort of presume before I worked for them, you sort of presume, oh, you know, they decide they want to push certain bands and they want to sort of create dialogue. If that's the case, I never saw it. They let me say whatever I felt like saying about music with zero interference, except for one case, which I'll get into if you want. But so there's that part of the story. There's the corporate side of it. And then there's what to me is the real story here, which is that as I experienced it, you would probably know better than I do. But in terms of where I first encountered the rise of this, what we would call, I guess, wokeness, but I'm trying to find a more precise term. This very dogmatic iteration of progressive values, quote unquote progressive, because I don't think they're progressive at all, actually. This sort of militated deployment of these ideas that ended up being vectors in culture. So, what eventually became Black Lives Matter, because it wasn't Black Lives Matter then, what eventually morphed into that, what eventually morphed into white privilege, what eventually morphed into believe women, believe accusers, trans rights, or trans women are trans rights are women's rights. Black trans lives matter. I experienced it as Pitchfork spearheaded the normalization of those kinds of that lexicon into pop culture, and then everybody else in media followed them. That may not be like an accurate read on what happened, but that's how I experienced it. They were very much in the lead in pushing a certain social agenda. I started writing for them because I proposed a story on a trans-led extreme metal band where the front woman, Marissa, who was originally Mike, they wrote an album with all these like deviant, violent sexual fantasies, and one of them was that her father kept her, or Mike, when she was Mike Martinez, was singing from the point of view of a kid whose dad keeps him in the closet, keeps a boy in the closet, tucks his genitals between his legs, shaves his skin. So he admitted later, so I think the music is awesome, by the way. This is like some of the most like fucking shocking, fun shit I've ever heard. They had a song about a guy driving around in a van, grabbing girls off the street and electroshocking them, not killing them, and not even sexually assaulting them, but you know, it's called taser. And this shit is like really like that was what this band was all about. So then Mike gets gender reassignment surgery. They do a second album, and I'm like, damn, this is an interesting fucking story. I propose it to Jessica Hopper, whose name you might recognize.
Yeah, of course.
From the whole R. Kelly thing.
She's kind of, I don't know that legendary is too far to go, but she's in terms of online music journalism, she's a heavy hitter.
Yes, for sure. So I pitched this to them, and her answer was almost verbatim. This is exactly the kind of story I'd like to see more of on the site.
Mm-hmm.
Little did I know that I was basically walking into the beginnings of the culture war, which had already started in academia decades before this. This,
of course, yeah.
This was a sudden flourishing of those kinds of ideas. If you were to ask me to guess, I wonder whether Pitchfork wasn't some kind of beta test for introducing these ideas almost like a virus into mass consciousness. Because after this, we saw the rest of music media follow suit. Although, you know, again, it might not have followed this exact sequence because a lot of these editors go from one place to another. So, you know, Jessica was at MTV before Pitchfork, I think, or maybe after. I can't remember exactly how it went down. So there's a lot of cross-transference, and there's generally what appears to be a uniformity of sociopolitical orientation.
Yeah, I don't mean to interrupt you.
No,
but but like I think that's what you're describing, that last chunk.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're putting that on top of your experience. I think that was happening in a lot of different places.
Yes. So, but eventually this spread outwards to all. So first it spread to entertainment media, then all media, then, or sports media included. And now it's to the point where you and I will encounter people who draw on this same lexicon, much as Jerod Mayo did.
Yeah, of course.
And use that as leverage to shut down any kind of dynamic challenge to these points of view.
Without a doubt.
Pitchfork was also big on driving the we must out male sexual indiscretions, and we're not canceling people. We're not talking about censorship. We're quote unquote holding people accountable.
You talking about Me Too?
Yes. Well, and even I think their version of it was even a little more high pitched.
Okay.
But yes, it was part of that. They were aggressively promoting an idea of sexual purity that I think is just unattainable, particularly in music and in art. And then at the same time, championing Black artists but in my view, not criticizing those artists. They were handling them with kid gloves, much as you saw at NPR.
Yeah.
And so what strikes me with this is like, you don't understand. This corporation was funding your side of the culture war, and you guys thought you were winning when you were just serving this, you're basically hood ornaments to a corporation that just wanted to profit from this stuff. How did you not see that this was coming? That you were eventually going to be thrown overboard, and this outcry of, oh my God, corporations are so greedy and they're so stupid, and who's going to champion artists, and there are fewer and fewer spaces to talk about artists, and there's a narrower and narrower bandwidth. It's like, well, okay, first of all, did you care about the artists that you gave 0.0 reviews to, whose careers were destroyed on the fucking spot? There's all of this righteous rhetoric about, oh, let's stand up to the evil corporation. This is horrible. This is unjust. It's like, well, what did you think they were going to do? Why do you have this sense of entitlement that a corporation should be underwriting your existence? That's one thing. So to me, it's naive and it's full of hubris. And also the fact that one of the staffers there, she was like, it's been an honor to work at Pitchfork for 8 years and turn it from a dude-centric, or make it less dudeish, only to have it end up in the hands of GQ. And to her, this is this terrible turnaround. And to me, it's kind of a delicious irony. Not that I think Barstool should run Pitchfork or something. Not that I think that would be great, but
It'd be interesting.
Music journalism is rife with ideological uniformity to a stultifying degree. You and I cannot express, even have this kind of conversation. There is no latitude whatsoever. Now, I did not feel suppressed by that, because I like to write from a sort of more, not neutral, but I like to write from a perspective where I'm not just stumping for something, from my point of view.
And
But
on that, to that point, I agree with you. Like, when I'm writing journalistically, when I'm working as a reporter, this whole thing has been an opinion-based deal. I'm just sharing my thoughts. But when I'm writing as a reporter, I'm not trying to take a side. I'm trying to explain a side.
Yes, or actually trying to explain multiple sides.
Yeah, multiple sides.
Right.
Yeah, ideally.
You and I were able to survive in these ideologically captured structures, working environments, because we don't simply like to stump. Like, we approach our writing from a more reserved place. So I never said anything that I didn't buy into.
Mm-hmm.
I was always making my points. I was just doing them in a discreet way. But my main point is that music journalists have been empowered to an outrageous and obscene degree in having influence over our moral compass. They think they have the right to dictate morals, and they have been so zealous about taking people's platforms away. They're basically book burners and mob vigilante justice stokers. And they don't see, like, I'm not hearing any awareness of that. There's just such an utter lack of self-awareness. And it's like, yo, you were the new regime. And what I said is, the dagger you used to slit someone's throat to take power is the same dagger that's going to be used on you when the regime changes. And now it's changed. And y'all are about to be a fucking footnote in history if you don't adjust. And nobody is taking stock of the fact that this shit went too fucking far. How on earth did we get to the place where music critics were our Gestapo? Where music critics were our religious police force? that is an extraordinary and like extraordinarily fucked up chain of events. And so these people are complaining because their jobs have been taken away, not realizing you guys have been culture war pawns. You've been operatives. You've been played by the hand that feeds, and now it just threw you to the curb. So go find something else to do or make your own model and stop bitching, basically. You've had so much power for so long. It's as if they thought it would never end, that it was just going to continue. Yes, GQ should fund us. Why? Well, because that seems really, really myopic to me. So I know I've gone on and on.
No, you inspired a lot of notes. I took down a few notes, and I wanted to throw a couple of thoughts back at you about your thoughts there. I think in a recent conversation that we had off mic, I mentioned Warren Jeffs to you.
Okay, who I'm not.
He led the fundamentalist Mormon church.
Okay.
And this was this church where they were marrying 13-year-olds.
Yes, you just mentioned this to me the other day.
Yeah. So the documentary I just saw, I believe it was on HBO Max. Or no, I think it was on Netflix actually. And what you were describing about them not seeing this coming, it intertwines again. In that, I think when you are a true believer, when you think that something like music journalism is not just, a profession, but or a passion, but like we are here to save the world, which has sort of been the sort of shift when it has come to journalism. In a lot of, especially where it's like, no, we're not here to just explain what we see or try to find some answers about stuff that's happening. No, we're here to save the world because we know what's right and you don't. When you have that perspective and the rug is pulled out from under you, it reminds me of a scene in this movie where Warren Jeffs step before this whole big group of 1,000+ fundamental Mormons, and he walks up front and he calls the names of leaders, of husbands, and their of husbands and their
spouses.
Yes, of husbands, not their spouses, just husbands. These were the most powerful men in this world. The only challengers to their power, his power. He calls them up, and he tells their wife and family that these men are no longer your fathers.
Mm-hmm.
And,
typical cult,
and
move.
just like and just excommunicates them. And when you hear the people in this series, this short run series, talk about this, it was like they felt that they were helpless. They felt that this system had taken care of them.
Mm-hmm.
They had fed them. They were close to the prophet. They were getting close to Zion. They were going that everybody was going in the right direction. They thought it was kooky at the time, but they felt like, hey, like this is what the prophet wants. We're gonna give the prophet what he wants. And they helplessly watched this go down. And while I don't think that these music journalists are as extreme as that,
they're close. They're close. They're a lot closer than they would ever even imagine. And I did compare that world to a cult. And I did compare the psychological exploitation of the fear of being ostracized to a cult. That is textbook organized religion 101. They don't see it that way. They mean well. They think they're doing the right thing. I think they're fighting. My last tweet was like, you've been allowed to think that you were fighting a righteous crusade this whole time. Y'all been played.
So yeah, I think that the being played is right on with what I was thinking. There's another thought that you said in a question that I'll follow, that I think I'd like to end with.
But first,
You
can you
said-
show? Sorry. First, can you
Yeah.
show the response I got, that Simpsons meme? I think that means that the guy wants to change seats because I'm about to get blown to bits in response.
Yeah, give me a minute. Give me a moment. I'll make sure we can share this.
Just anymore.
Just a moment.
That is really funny.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to share my screen again. Ba-ba-ba-ba. Come on, StreamYard. Don't fail me now. There we are. There we are. Yeah.
I think that's clearly what that was intended to, like, dude, you're about to get fucking, to me, you're about to get blown up. Or maybe that incoming missile thing is what I tweeted. But I don't think that's what was meant here.
So the other note I took was, you mentioned that the regime has changed.
It's changing.
Yeah.
The writing on the wall.
I don't think that's what's happened.
Okay.
I think the economic reality has.
I was just going to say, you see this as just a market forces story.
Absolutely. I don't think like, I had a very interesting conversation that I'd love to talk to you off mic about recently. And with a former media executive. Excellent resume, involved with some giant shit. And he was saying that media companies don't care what the content is. They care that it solves a problem for them.
But see, where this is a regime change, I think, is that the media ecosystem is no longer by default supporting these viewpoints that were once championed and propagated by some of their most prominent broadcast towers, at least in this area. So now if music journalists go and create their own co-op model, they're going to largely be preaching into an echo chamber.
Yeah.
I think, I don't think the symbolism of this ending up with GQ is just purely symbolism. I think the iron grip that this ideological fervor has had, at least in terms of music criticism or music media, is changing, because you got more YouTubers now who just aren't necessarily paying lip service to this stuff, or they're kind of sidestepping it, right?
Sure.
So I do think something is shifting.
I do think something is shifting. I think that when there's less money, free money just sloshing around, there's less room to just embrace your political ideology with every step. you need to produce it. News has news used to be a loss leader,
Mm.
and then it became a highly profitable sector.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're back to loss leader land for most brands. Most news, like it's like you're not making a ton. And I think that the vanity projects, and I don't think Pitchfork was always that, but I think to a Condé Nast, they might see it that way.
Mm.
When Pitchfork was standing on its own 2 feet, probably not so much.
Mm-hmm.
But to a Condé Nast, who's got a much bigger catalog, they have much more valuable IP that they are leveraging in different ways, and that they think the potential to leverage are bigger. Since Pitchfork did never totally reach that, Rolling Stone possibility pinnacle, that I thought that I at one point, I think you did, thought it would end up being. Probably just because of the time it came up in. I think if it came up 10 years earlier, maybe it does. But it emerged when it emerged. So it didn't quite reach that plateau. I think that Anna Wintour and the folks over at Condé Nast are like, hey, this is not reached this level. We're paying all these people. Yes, we're paying them a bit more, and that's great. But like the reach that we get out of this just isn't worth, the juice isn't worth the squeeze.
Mm-hmm.
We could have allowed them to run amok and preach their philosophy on whatever, and we probably agree with it.
Well, it was socially expedient for them to do it because, they get sort of brownie points as a corporation for virtue signaling.
Until it gets to the point where, like, hey, we got bigger problems. And that's where you get swatted like a fly. That's what I think just happened with that situation. We can it's kind of like ESPN and the Undefeated.
Mm.
To bring that back up, it's now Anscape. You know why it turned into Anscape?
No.
Because they don't own the IP to the Undefeated.
Oh my goodness. Similar to, well, not exactly, but it's a weird parallel with the SI thing.
Yeah, right. So they had to rebrand because they said, hey, the Undefeated as is does not make money. Just doesn't. It's a similar, I think it was a similar play, and I think it was a similar time where the Undefeated was launched as Pitchfork was bought. It doesn't make money. We need to do additional things to actually make money in order to justify this thing existing. Therefore, we need to own the IP. So we'll come up with a name for it, even if it's less valuable and less well known. And then we can exploit it to make money in a bunch of different ways, whether it's merch or it's having festivals and charging people ridiculous amounts of money to watch other people speak and stuff, that kind of thing. The kind of thing that New York Times does, CNBC does, a bunch of other people do them too. Axios does them.
They're Juggalo events.
Yeah, yes, that's back. We're back to Juggalo events.
Who knew?
And I guess, and all this brings me to my last question for you on Pitchfork is, do you think it's even possible to have a Pitchfork now knowing that this is what the owners who are seeing the books of Pitchfork have decided to do? That no, you are not your own thing. We don't think you're self-sustainable. No, you're going to be a page on GQ.com, and maybe we'll give you a couple articles in the hardcover version. Is it even possible to have a Pitchfork now as it was?
Well, I don't. I don't know.
What's your
My
gut say?
my guess is that yes, but it'll be something totally different. I think we're already moving into uncharted territory. And by the way, you and I are late to the YouTube party. That's going to get like severely regulated. I mean, it already is, but
Yeah.
we're at the mercy of that. Anybody on YouTube, content creator, they can just on a whim do whatever the fuck they want. So there's always going to be a new uprising. By the way, I think that American music journalists should seriously consider the overseas market for blogs, because I had a Zoom meeting with a couple of guys who started a music platform in India. I think they were in Bangalore. And they were saying that they have lots of people throughout India who are willing to write a short record review for the equivalent of $5 American. And he said, I know that sounds really low, but like somebody in our economy can do very well for a week, off of what we're paying them.
Sure.
And he said that there were lots and lots of like, he hinted that there were like hundreds of people who were eager to write about music. And I had this flash and I told them, I was like, yo, let's invent the blogosphere 2.0, but in Southeast, in South Asia.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, we don't really feel like we have the resources, but I'm chomping at the bit for that to happen, because I mean, who's to say that it couldn't?
Yeah.
But as far as here, I think it's going to be a different medium. We're already seeing how much music discussion on video has taken off. I think that's where things are going now. Do new discovery, do like up and coming unknown bands get benefit from that? Not really, because if you talk about the Rolling Stones 500 times a year, you're going to get clicks, right? If you talk about established storylines, you kind of have to keep going back to these established storylines, and you're just going to get more traffic on that stuff. Something else will emerge from the rubble, but it was time to knock it down, I think. I think ultimately the absorption and so I guess the sort of neutralization, putting Pitchfork on life support, basically is what we're seeing, is going to end up being a good thing, because now you have a bunch of music critics who are all fired up, who are looking to create some kind of new model. Let's see what they come up with.
So, blogosphere in Asia, and who knows, maybe Africa as well.
Sure, and with video as well. I mean, but some new version of the blogosphere that I think could very much be a mover and shaker in other parts of the world. But then here, just thinking forward, I mean, why aren't more music critics doing video and interacting with one another the same way you are? They could band together. They could. I mean, lots of them are doing podcasts, right? But podcasts seem kind of saturated. Audio podcasts, I mean, that seems kind of saturated. I think there's something in video that is maybe fertile.
Interesting.
And a co-op model, I've seen that. One of my former editors suggested a co-op model. I mean, I don't know how that would work, but it certainly sounds interesting.
Yeah, and I do think that there's some possibilities there. I do worry about the long-term feasibility of that. It's one of those things for local news that I've always sort of have been interested in. I think that if you can commit to being small, then I think a co-op model will work. I think if you scale it too much, I think there'll be problems.
Well, that just sparked an idea. Why don't music journalists try to bring back something like a 2.0 sort of zombie resurrection of the alternative news weekly model, but with a general sort of culture kind of angle, and make it hyper-local, like somewhere between an alternative news weekly and a zine, but digital and microbrewed hyper-local. Could that work?
Yeah, I think it could work if you. I think this is where we're both in Substack land, and I think that's where some of that can and will be baked. Or at least started. I don't know that. I worry about the long term of it all, but in terms of incubator, I think it's a good place to start. I think I can totally see. I think in many ways we are going to go back to the zine model, but the thing is, the only thing those reasons why we scaled up from those worlds is because of the lack of profitability. So I think you're going to have to. There's going to take some ingenuity to figure out how to make that work. I was looking at several models because in my day job I was writing about somebody who was running a small black newspaper for a very long time, and it was very narrow, very deep, and they did it for a half century. And it worked because the audience was so specific. People were willing to pay for this thing. There was a subscription base. I don't know how fertile it was, but it was enough to support them, their family, and a writers, and there are a wealth of models that have existed that could be modified or tweaked for now.
Right, and there's no shortage of people who want music-oriented content that they haven't gone anywhere.
Time for people to put it together for them.
Right. So it also begs the question: are some of the people who lost their salaried staff position gigs? I wonder how many of them are going to end up in a better spot if they respond to this and think on their feet.
Well, if they have the balls enough to be, Dave Portnoy, if they have the balls enough to be the dissenter, I think are what they're called, the former Deadspin people. If they have the guts and the gumption to sort of like give it a shot, and the savvy to figure out a model that works, they could be. I think many of them are going to end up at the, writing for NPR affiliates or who are continually swallowing local magazines and alt weeklies and newspapers. They're going to end up at, if they're lucky, the Times or Post or something like that.
Well, a lot of them won't. I mean, there's more contributors out there than with the staffers. Yes, I think some of them will.
Yeah, I was talking about the staffers.
Yeah.
Contributors are a whole other thing. I think contributors. I think that's where you'll likely see the gumption in the risk taking, because like you have to. Like you can't just stop. You got to live your life.
Well, and also music media, entertainment media in general is like so long overdue for heterodox outlets covering. You either have the usual suspects, which are aligned all in one uniform direction, and you don't have much in the conservative sphere in terms of arts coverage. You have sort of celebrity storylines and everything, but in the middle, that soil is just sitting there waiting for somebody with a plow and an ox and some brains and some seeds and some business sense, or a team of people, because whether or not people know that they're hungry for it, I think I said this before about a community, whether or not people know that they're hungry for it, they are hungry for music coverage, commentary that comes from a more broad, varied perspective. So whoever can do that is going to strike gold. And I've thought many times that I want to do that. I just don't know even where to start.
Well, I believe it's possible. I want to make it happen. And I say don't give up yet.
No, and I think the way to do it, for it to succeed, would be to not do what the anti-woke YouTuber army has done, which is to take a similar high-pitched, constant sort of, banging that drum all the time, is to do it more discreetly and just bring things back to a more reasonable form of discourse, but using language that is not incendiary or politically charged to proselytize, and just sort of talk about things from a more measured place, and with a sense of reserve, but where you're re-normalizing, reintroducing certain ways of looking at subjects that have been taboo for the last decade.
Agreed. And to close, I'll ask the last question. What are you reading, watching, or listening to that you find remarkable?
I am reading The Outsiders when I'm not starting fights on Twitter, because I tweeted Jamel Hill right before I tweeted that about her Aaron Rodgers story, trying to paint him out to be some sort of, crackpot right-wing extremist. I'm reading The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. I'm enjoying it. What am I? I'm really enjoying Ethan Strauss's House of Strauss. Really enjoying that. Listening and watching, because it's on Substack audio, and then you can watch it now on YouTube.
Awesome. I was just reading Principles by Ray Dalio.
Oh,
are you familiar with Ray Dalio?
yeah, I think I've sent you, or you sent me, or I've sent you a clip of his. Is he the guy that hangs with Puffy?
Yes. He's
okay.
the
You had already heard about him when
Yeah.
I sent you the clip.
Yeah. I was very interesting book. It's about his both life and business principles, and how he approaches investing, how he approaches learning. And he's another bigger believer in sort of, that we go through giant market cycles, and he thinks we're at the end of one. Fascinating food for thought there. I was just listening to Spiritualized.
Oh,
last
okay,
night.
cool.
I was revisiting Ladies and Gentlemen, We're Floating in Space.
Okay.
I enjoyed that record way back when, and I was listening. It just sort of came up in conversation, and I just spent a bunch of time with it last night and when I was driving around earlier today. And in terms of I also in the podcasting world, I've been spending an inordinate amount of time listening to Steve Deace's show.
I'm not familiar. No, I'm not.
Okay, Steve Deace is based out of Iowa, but he has a national show. He's on the Blaze Network, and it's not so much even like his rhetoric, because I believe maybe, I don't know, maybe half I agree with. It's his tone. He does not sound like a radio talk guy. He is so calm most of the time. And I like his approach. It's kind of analytical. He's a political animal. Obviously, if you're part of Blaze world, you are on the right. So Yeah, I find his show interesting. Yeah.
I should also mention I'm reading Harry Potter for the first time
Oh,
because I'm reading it to my daughter at bedtime and
wow.
really, really enjoying it. I really like it, and it's reassuring to see that some people are just too big to cancel.
Yeah. Shout out to J.K. Rowling.
Yeah, because I mean, because we're not fucking book burners here.
Yeah.
And I do think that when there was an attempt to bring down Michael Jackson with that documentary, which I thought was not convincing at all. I thought those guys they sounded like they were lying to me. Like something about my gut was just like, I'm not finding this believable. Now, clearly there was something amiss there, and I can't profess to know. But when the whole world decided en masse to say, you know what, we're not going to be able to convince ourselves. We're not even going to go through the charade of convincing ourselves that we haven't been enjoying Michael Jackson this whole time. We're not going to take this away from ourselves on account of a principle. I think that was a watershed moment that we'll look back on. And similarly, now the attempts on J.K. Rowling have been way more aggressive and even scarier. It's been so much more venomous, but I mean, she hasn't been successfully removed. So I'm enjoying that. I'm surprised at the writing. I was just never interested in Harry Potter, and I'm like, oh, this is pretty good shit. And as far as music, I had never listened to the first 4 U2 albums in full, and I'm a big fan of theirs.
Oh.
And I did a U2 Deep Cuts Roundtable podcast episode on my channel.
Unforgettable Fire?
What's that?
Boy?
Yeah, I had never. Boy, War, October. No, Boy, October, War, and Unforgettable Fire are the first 4.
Okay.
I had tried in the past, but never got into them. So I listened to sort of look for deep cuts, and that's posting to my channel soon. So, but I sat down and like went through those 4 records a couple times, and that was really cool. Really enjoyable.
Well, Saby, plug away, and we'll blow this popsicle stand.
Yeah, man. You mean you want me to say where people can?
Yeah, where can people find you?
So Feedback Def on YouTube. It's you have it listed, and at SabyRK _ on Twitter. Unfortunately, that's what it has to be. And then feedbackdef.substack.com.
Well,
and if you search Feedback Def on Spotify, also there's an audio version of the podcast. There's a few episodes up there.
Well, Saby, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
It was a real pleasure. Now let's get to some football.
Yeah.
All right, man. I'll talk to you soon.
Yep.
Thanks again.
And I good everybody. Good night.
Over and out.